Okay, so Sasha, on Monday I got to visit your fourth grade math class, and I came right at the beginning of the day, right at 8:30. So all of your kids were just getting started with their math day. So talk to me a little bit about the lesson that day. How do you think it went?
I think overall it went well because it was a routine activity, something that they were used to doing, just the content had changed. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it was, they knew what to do, and I think that it was a strong lesson.
Mm-hmm. So, like when you mentioned that it's a strong lesson, what do you feel like were some of the strengths of your lesson?
I think the strength was just that it was routine. So they kind of the procedure, like the format, the framework was very routine. So it was just focusing on the content. So they could just focus on division. And so
Mm-hmm.
the problem solving boards, that's something they had used with addition and subtraction. So now they could just focus on how can I use this to solve these problems, these division problems. So it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
learning two different things. It was just being
Right.
able to have a structure to focus on the concept being taught.
So they were able to kind of like transfer strategies that they've used in prior
Right.
operations to the new operation that
Correct.
they'd been
Yes.
working on. So during this time, we're going to talk about those areas of strength, and they were actually really hard to pick areas of strength. So I could have just gone on in every domain about all your areas of strength, and how you can kind of leverage those strengths to think about an area that you feel that you're still growing in. So one of the areas of strength that I observed, like blew me away, was differentiation. So, talk to me a little bit about how does small group instruction ensure that you are engaging and supporting your students of all ability levels?
With that lesson, there's I have level groups. So there's group one, two, three, and four. That's based on how they've done with a pre-assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have an activity, it's that agenda you saw. And so every agenda is kind of different. It will say, if I'm in group two, I'm doing this. So they're
Mm-hmm.
doing already leveled activities, games, online programs that I've built for them. And so they're already learning the content at their level. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I pull them, it's based off of the questions that they missed, specifically off of a quick check, which is a morning assessment. So I pull kids grouped on what they have, I guess, failed on before. And I'm not pulling all of them or doing that with everybody because some of them got it correct. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole class runs at a pace that's built for them.
Mm-hmm. So you use data that you collect on a pretty regular basis,
Yeah.
like not just through CBAs and benchmarks, but morning assessments to kind
Yes.
of drive your
Morning
small group
assessments,
instruction.
exit tickets, and then also I do something on it's learning where they can do like answer something and I can tell based on that how well they
Mm-hmm.
do. So it's like a daily thing.
Yeah, so you're kind of checking for understanding, like when they come in, as they leave, and then as they're working
Right.
throughout using technology to do
Right.
that with its learning pool. So I noticed that in your group, you guys use multiple different strategies on your problem solving board. So for my non-math brain, the strip diagram and then even representing it, it seemed like with the algorithm, and even the algorithm looked a little different than when I was in fourth grade.
Right.
But why do you feel like it's important to provide multiple strategies to teach and assess your students?
For me, I'm a visual learner. I can't just see someone do it and say, oh, I got it. I got to see maybe someone doing it, maybe a model of it, maybe a picture, and putting all that together gives me that understanding. And I feel like with our students, we need different methods to show them. And so one of those methods are going to catch, but all of them
Mm-hmm.
together will build that idea for them. And so that's why there's 7 squares on one piece of
Mm-hmm.
paper because we're going to do it until they kind of get that, oh, I got it, kind of
Mm-hmm.
way. So,
So by using different strategies, you're able to like tap into your learners that are visual learners, and
right.
then your students that need to see things represented in
Right.
another way.
And a lot of times when I see kids that think they're visual or they think they're what is it kinesthetic,
Kinesthetic.
yeah, they think these things, but when they're actually doing them, they realize this actually works better for me.
Hmm.
So it's the doing that
Right. They're able to kind of self-discover
right.
different methods that work best for them.
Way to say
So
that. Yeah.
some of the evidence that I observed in the area of differentiation was that it was really apparent that you spend time not just looking at whether or not your students get the correct answer or if they don't, but you're also looking at how they come to the answers that they come to, like what strategies they're using. And so I thought by utilizing the problem solving mat, you really supported your students in thinking through each step of the problem with your guidance. And I even kind of noticed there was a different level of guidance for the two groups that I observed, one needing more guidance and one needing a little bit less guidance, which I feel like leads kind of to your next strength, which is I thought was monitoring and adjusting instruction to meet your students' needs. So you talked a little bit about how you gather information as to what skills your students have mastered and which ones they'll need more support. So when I'm thinking about the level of support that you're providing for your kids in groups, how do you use that information to determine the level of scaffolds or support that your kids need in group?
Well, it's really based off the teak as well. Like, does the teak say represent, or does the teak say build? Does it say solve? And so when I have those verbs, or I guess those words, then I will say what the strengths of these students, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about also like the strength of the students with these words, and then the concept. So all three of those things play a part into how I see how am I going to scaffold this. I
Mm-hmm.
also give them like quick checks, like I told you. Sometimes they're second grade and then
Mm-hmm.
train box. That's a tool that I use to scaffold. I know if they're secure in second grade, are they secure in third grade. I have a student that is in eighth grade level, so I know before she comes in that these things will not work. They're not going to benefit
Mm-hmm.
her. So I think it's just pulling all those different components in to kind of see where they're at and where they need to go. I don't know if that answers the
No,
question.
absolutely. So you're saying that different teaks require a certain level of thinking, and
Right.
it kind of just depends on what level of thinking your students have based on maybe their prior years of
Right.
math. So like if we have a student maybe operating at a second or third grade level, they're going to need a higher level of scaffolding for
Right.
our tougher fourth grade skills, like those beastie like multi-step
Right.
problems, which
Yes.
arguably maybe had 3 or 4 steps in that multi-step
Right.
problem.
Which
So
is not difficult.
I can see how working with maybe a second or third grade level. So that's neat that Dreambox can help you to kind of gather that
That's a
data,
great tool.
and then those daily checks for understanding. So some of the evidence that I gathered about monitoring and adjusting instruction were just in those 2 groups that I mentioned before. So the first group that we were looking at, they missed a particular question, and you stated that they didn't use any strategies. And so I love that you didn't assume that they didn't have any strategies, because you started the conversation off with what strategies could we have used, rather than just jumping right into teaching them or reteaching them a strategy. And the students responded that they could have used a strip diagram or the algorithm, and you confirmed that and then continued to guide them through that process. And I noticed that with that group, you modeled, it seemed a lot more with the first group than with the second group. So it seems that like you would all make the decision together, and then you would all write it on the paper together. And in the second group, it was a multi-step problem. And I noticed that when the group sat down, Isabella was really eager. Like she like knew like what are we going to do first? And the first group you asked what are we going to do first, and they said read the question. But Isabella started the second group by saying, well, first we're going to read the question.
Right.
And I love that you really honored what she knew by kind of letting her facilitate the conversation, and rather than just modeling, you probed them with questions on what to do next, because they did know. So it seemed like that group needed less scaffolding than your first group did.
And I think knowing your kids is how I did that. I knew who to pull in the first group because Isabella's pace and her saying things would have been too fast for them.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been too much. And so it's knowing your kids. I mean, just having those experiences throughout the year to know that these kids need to go together and these kids need to go together.
So you not only consider like their academic needs, but almost their
Social,
emotional
yeah,
needs
all those
too.
things,
Yeah, that's really important. So I can see how Isabella could overwhelm some of your thinkers that are, that one little girl in that first group, she just really seemed like it was tough just to think about what that strip diagram would look like, versus Isabella would have just led that whole comfortable with. Um, so because I observed you facilitating mostly small group instruction, I just had a couple of questions about what the other students are doing. So I love the My Division agenda. It looks like as much thought goes into your My Division agenda as you do your small groups. It looked like students were grouped really purposefully, and that they were assigned activities that you felt would best meet their needs. You kind of alluded to that earlier. So one thing I'm wondering is, how are you going to hold students and individuals accountable for that work that they're doing in their whole group?
So that agenda is either for the day or it's for the week. And they know that the time they have, their agenda is based off of their ability to. They know that they need to finish all those things by the end of the week or by the day. Mm-hmm. And so they have to pace themselves. They can say on Monday, I'm not even halfway done and I'm on Thursday. So this is for them to gauge. And if not, we have a conference. You're only finished 2 things and it's Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Why is this? And you have 10 things to finish. So we have those conversations. I'm playing, I'm off task, or I don't get it, you know. So
Mhm.
it's either for them or for me to kind of come to that conclusion. And we have those at the beginning of the year. And sometimes I have kids off task, and it's just because they make the wrong choices. But for
Mhm.
overall, I noticed that having to complete so many things by Friday really
Mhm.
pushes them. Oh my gosh, it's Friday, and I still have two more to do. You know,
Okay.
and so they're kind of learning to pace themselves. Like, okay, if there's 10, I need to do
Mhm.
two on Monday, two on Wednesday, you know, that kind of thing.
So even though they're in a teacher structured activity, you still let them have some self-direction in
Yes.
choosing like their pacing and when
Right.
things get completed.
Yes, but of course I oversee these things beforehand. I know, and I'm like, this is really challenging, so I'm only going to give them this group
Right.
maybe 5 and I'll 7 for this group because it's challenging, but they can handle it. So
Mhm.
they do get that, but I also foresee what they might, you know, come to when they're doing those activities.
So you're kind of thinking about those misconceptions they might
Yes,
have and the
exactly.
pace that they might
Right,
need to take
right.
things. So, what opportunities do you provide students to set their own individual goals? So, I noticed that you've assigned them into those groups.
Mhm.
So, what does student goal setting look like in your classroom?
So they have a goal setting sheet. Well, it's the TEKS, and they have
Mm-hmm.
to come up with the standard is 70. So they know that they have to at least have a 70 to master that TEK. But there's some students, I can think of like 5 or 6 that they want to get 100, you know, so they'll
Mm-hmm.
say that's my goal is to get a 100 by the end of each of those. Sometimes it's Wednesday to Wednesday. So
Mm-hmm.
when the agenda is over, they have an assessment and their goal is to get a 100. Their goal is to get a 70. And so they get to know, did I meet my goal? And then did I meet Miss Noble's goal, which is a 70? So
Mm-hmm.
that's about as much goal setting as, you know, I have for
Okay, so your students' goals are set on the TEKs that they're
math.
currently working on, but the students also kind of have a little bit of freedom into what level of mastery
Yeah.
they
Yes.
can attain to
Right.
within those
Right.
goals. So, well, I really enjoyed listening in on your class. It was a completely different format of math that I've ever seen. It blew my mind. Do you have any questions or anything that you'd want to add?
No, I benefited from you being there. I really did, just like your thoughts. And everything kind of shifted my thinking. So it was awesome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.